Thanks for joining us for this conversation following this marvelous shorts program. And it's my absolute honor to introduce a really wonderful person who's done a lot for queer visibility in Ukraine. But I first want to start off by thanking Polina Buchak and Polly of Razom for Ukraine for putting this together with Bohdan. My name is Nick McCarthy. I'm the director of programming at NewFest, which is New York's leading LGBTQ plus film and media organization. You may know us best for our annual New York LGBTQ plus film festival, which will be celebrating its 36th annual festival this October 10th through the 22nd. We also host programming year-round to share the voice and visibility of the queer community, but also to gather them in intentional queer spaces to build further connections, solidarity, and understanding across our community and beyond. Now, it's my absolute pleasure to read a brief bio of the wonderful achievements of Mr. Bohdan Zhuk and have a little conversation. So Bohdan is a programmer for the Kyiv International Film Festival, Molodist, Ukraine's biggest film event, which will be having its 53rd edition, taking place October 24th through November 3rd. With education in linguistics and professional background as a translator, journalist, and radio host, he joined the Molodist team in 2014 as a press attaché until 2015, and then as a programmer. He programs competition and non-competition sections of Molodist and curates its LGBTQ plus program, Sunny Bunny, Ukraine's oldest regular queer-themed event since 2001. In 2023, Sunny Bunny became a standalone queer film festival, Ukraine's first, with Zhuk as its co-founder and director. Sunny Bunny held its second edition just this past April 2024, and I can't wait to talk all about it and its marvelous successes. Zhuk also manages international events of Molodist dedicated to Ukrainian films. That includes programs at festivals such as Encounters in Bristol, UK, Beast in Portugal, Jugend Filmtag in Zurich, Switzerland, Suroi in Berlin, Queerscope festivals in Germany and Switzerland, Imagination in Montreal, Canada, as well as Ukrainian Film Days abroad, Munich, London, Paris, Porto, Prague. He also works in the selection team of the Beast International Film Festival in Porto and communications, British Council of Ukraine, and translates film for national releases and festival screenings, and has served on a host of juries throughout the world. I read all of that because I wanted to give Bohdan all the credit that he deserves for the work that he does, not just within Ukraine, but throughout the world. So please join me. I know you're in the theater right now. Huge round of applause for Bohdan Zhuk. And thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Nick, for this amazing intro. I'm very happy to be talking to you about this and very happy that we have this opportunity to show these amazing films.
Yeah. So I guess, we can start at the heart of it too, right? These short films that everyone just experienced in this space together. I know it's a collection of 6 short films, and I'd love to hear a bit about the collaborative curation process that went into this. I'd say both sort of what you were looking for to, distill within, I know it's always hard in 80 minutes. How do you show sort of a full scope of the LGBTQ plus experience, but also something that's both singular and universal from a cultural perspective. So I'd love to hear a bit about the curation process in choosing these 6 films to present.
Well, it's always tough to do this curation, as you know, of course, as a fellow curator. But, we, first of all, we choose from what we have. Second of all, we try to have as much representation and diversity in this small program. It's just 6 films, but I hope that it brought some diversity in terms of forms and genres and identities of queerness.
I love how these 6 do encompass what you just said, sort of like a past, a present, and a future, right? There's an affirming, I think, really, aspirational excitement sort of about the future, like I'm looking towards the future too, without, being myopic about the present. And I think, you mentioned Simitz. So if we're talking about sort of a recollection of the past too, I love in particular the use of the, images and the archival photographs, that they are water stained, like they are kind of lost in like a flood afterwards too, but it takes on this kind of watercolor aesthetic and effect. I was wondering if you could talk a bit about sort of how excited you were about that short.
This kind of look into the past and uncovering the past is very, very essential for, anywhere, but in particular in Ukraine, where, we have only 30 years of independence before we had to deal with dictatorial regime of the Soviet Union. Before that, there were empires, the Russian Empire, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, which meant a lot of oppression and erasing different identities, which means just erasing Ukrainian identities. We've suffered genocides as well, and now we are experiencing that again, unfortunately. To me, this is a very clear parallel of Ukrainian identity and the queer identity, because both of them were like continuously intended to be erased by someone else. And of course, and we don't know much about queer culture from the past in Ukraine. And so a film like this, like Simei's and other stories that look into the past are very, very meaningful. I cannot stress this enough, how it's important to discover this and to have a better understanding of our present and an outlook into the future, as you said, which is difficult now, considering the war and all the challenges related to it. But I think films like this, art like this, research, there hasn't been any research ever of queer cinema in Ukraine. So this is very meaningful.
Yeah. And I think, you open the program with Kyiv, and I know towards the end of, that film, I know Antonina says something along the lines of like, all my art is political. I don't believe in art outside politics. But it also, of course, creates that bridge to sort of discuss like their military joining too, and sort of like how her and her partner are together sort of in the military, and acknowledges that registered partnerships between homosexual couples are still not acknowledged. I was wondering if you can just talk a bit about the socio-political context of that kind of, and the current status of that since 2022.
Yeah, that's a very good point from Antonina about art being political. I believe that very sincerely. I don't believe that art can be beyond politics or outside of politics. And that's what we had. Ukrainians, in particular, Ukrainian curators and workers in arts and creative industries had to discuss and try to convince our foreign colleagues very persistently about this, because in terms of representation of Russian cinema and Russian art, which we insisted is, and still insist, of course, that it's not the time to listen to them, to look at their work, because our identity is endangered. Mm-hmm. Our lives are endangered, and so there should be more attention to Ukrainian context, Ukrainian themes, Ukrainian subjects, and this is, of course, a colonial war. And Russia has maintained its imperialism. And so the subject of decolonization is very essential in this regard. And art, is the best means to handle this, to tackle and to try to convey how these maybe not what let's say the Western world has been used to seeing as colonial or imperialist, because the colonies of the UK or Netherlands or Portugal, they had a completely different history, and this is the Ukrainian history, and having to deal with the empires that tried to absorb and subjugate us were quite different. But still, it's important to be talking about this colonialism that unfortunately still persists.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and give visibility to that pernicious effect as well. And I think going back to another like Antonina, she says that like you can try to take our land, but like we will fight to keep our culture. And I think that's a really powerful statement as well. And thinking about sort of what is singular about Ukrainian culture that we see throughout a lot of these short films too. I mean, even looking at like With Love Koptev, this is more of a dancey kind of music video rendering, but it also includes, some art recreation that's framed within, I think, a very specifically Ukrainian lens. So I'm curious if you can talk a bit about that, because I was taken with sort of just the observation of sort of queer bodies and dynamism and kissing in spaces too. So wonder if you can talk a bit about that short film too.
Well, with Love Koptiv, yeah, it gives us a glimpse into this quite peculiar theater called Orchidea. And Mikhailo Koptiv, who is a self-described marginal trash designer, has created this. And he comes from Luhansk, a city in eastern Ukraine, which was occupied in 2014, which is, another reminder that this war has been going on for 10 years now, more than 10 years. And so he relocated to Kyiv and keeps living here and doing his art, his work, which is quite peculiar. But yeah, I think like most artists here, he is influenced by the Ukrainian identity and Ukrainian culture, which means maybe some more traditional things, but rethinking, reimagining the tradition. And yeah, it's and for instance, in Before Curfew, the song at the end of the film is a very traditional song for Ukraine, like everyone knows it. And also it's a reference to Shadows of Forgotten Ancestors by Sergei Parajanov, who was not Ukrainian, but he is considered also a Ukrainian director because he lived and worked in Ukraine a lot. And Shadows of Forgotten Ancestors is considered to be the greatest Ukrainian film of all time. And he was queer, and that's not discussed enough. And, you can see the queerness in his films and more in his later films than in Shadows, but still, it's a very subtle reference to this queerness, I believe, by Angelika Ostimenko. And so, yeah, these little incorporations are very insightful, I would say, and add a lot to the stories that these filmmakers tell.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you mentioned Before Curfew, of course. And I know within the film they mentioned, like, have you seen Before Sunrise? But, that all the hetero cringe. It's a really lovely film. And I think, it peels back those layers throughout its runtime to sort of you realize kind of their conversation around pre-war life and sort of current pain, but also like a process of healing, packaged within this very sweet sort of radical tenderness as well. So it was a very exciting, short to watch. As I guess we can chat a bit more about the films, but I'm curious kind of, as it relates to that idea of sort of exploring spaces and sharing them on cinema, with a common theme within this too. If you can talk a bit about the creation of Sunny Bunny as its standalone festival too.
Yeah, so Sunny Bunny exists for a while and it has quite a long history for more than 20 years. As you mentioned in the intro, it was founded a queer program that a few years later got its name, was introduced at Molodist in 2001. But of course, the festival in general the festival is 54. We are going to have a 53rd edition this year, but it's 54 years old because it had 1 year to skip in 1991 after Ukraine got its independence. So yeah, it was founded in 1970 as a youth festival, as a festival of, as a small showcase of students' works from the Kyiv Film School, and later it grew into something big and the largest Ukrainian film festival. And it was always aiming to show quite avant-garde work and quite experimental and radical, often works, and queer works among them. So it was queer film was always part of it. When I joined the team in 2014, with taking on Sunny Bunny as well, we changed the program a bit, and we decided to expand, have fiction feature-length films in competition, but also show some short films out of competition, some documentaries, maybe something classic, just to, So it was already a small festival within the festival. And it was, I was thinking about separating it for a while before last year, and we were talking about it with colleagues, and then there was the pandemic, so that was not the right time to start a new festival. But now, after the full-scale war, after the immediate shock when it happened in 2022, after some time, we realized that we may be able to do the festival in general, Molodist, with very limited means, with a lot of restrictions, with a lot of issues to handle. And still, we believe that we can do this and that it was essential. In times of war, it's very meaningful to provide any art, but films in particular, because they can be a distraction, they can be therapeutic, they can just give you some insights. Films can give you a lot, as we all know. And so we believed and were very certain that we can do this. But at that time, we already decided that we won't make Sunny Bunny part of Molodist in 2022, which we reduced a lot from our usual program of more than 200 films. We had a small edition. We were already at the festival, the first festival last year, and the second festival this year. We have been talking about the bill about registered partnerships for same-sex couples. In particular, it would be very meaningful for queer couples or couples of same gender who are serving in the army in particular, and who are fighting, but they cannot, or if one of the couple is serving and, the other person has no rights whatsoever. This is just one of the things that we intend to do at the festival, with the festival, because it's, it's not just a festival of art, of film. It's much more. When it's a queer film festival, it's very political. It's talking about a lot of issues that need to be discussed. And
I think all those pieces together too, and also, just creating this intentional safer space, right, for the community too, but also allies and advocates to join and gather, right? You're sort of creating more and more connections, right? Whether folks are waiting in line or sitting in the theater waiting for a film to start, starting a conversation, like that is building more and more, human connection and understanding, even without it's seeming like it's an overwhelming sort of powerful, space. So what was, I guess, you talked about sort of an overall sort of exciting bit of it, but, was there a moment during the festival too that's just like transcendent kind of, and also, thinking about next year, what are your, hopes and dreams kind of to develop even further around Sunny Bunny as its own festival?
Well, one of the main purposes for this festival that I, intended, and my colleagues as well, was to uncover and what I was talking about before, to uncover queerness in Ukrainian culture from the past in cinema. And we did the first small retrospective of Ukrainian cinema last year at Sunny Bunny, and I hope to be doing this further. And I believe it's, there hasn't been, as I said, any research of queerness in Ukrainian cinema. So I hope that maybe we'll manage to somehow promote and support this. And I hope really that the festival will be supporting production of queer cinema. In general, I believe that the festival can be like a hub for queer festivals and, making connections in our region in Eastern Europe. Mm-hmm. I'm sure that it will become this in the future, and hopefully it is becoming this already. We already started supporting production of queer films this year. One film already got its first prize and will be hopefully made soon. Maybe we'll see it next year. And I really hope that we will be able to do this in the future, maybe to expand so that we don't only have to the support for short films, but we are able to handle maybe bigger budgets, bigger awards, and support more the production of feature-length films and maybe make it international. We'll see. But that's my idea and my hope for the next years.
And I know many people may speak Ukrainian that are attending this screening and such too, but if you can give the translation of sort of the creation of what Sunny Bunny as a phrase means too.
Right. Yeah. So Sunny Bunny, or in Ukrainian, it means it's Sonячny Zaychik, has a few meanings, I would say, because, the name came, I think, the inspiration back when it was founded, because I was not involved back then. I was still a kid, but the inspiration came from the Teddy Awards in Berlinale, which was, as some know, the first award for queer films at non-specialized film festivals in the world. And Molodis was actually the second, at least to our knowledge, to do this with Sunny Bunny in 2001. So yeah, the inspiration came from there, Teddy Bear and Sunny Bunny. So it's like a godchild maybe of teddies. That's what
ecosystem, natural ecosystem too.
Yes, but also Sonячny Zaychik means a reflection of the mirror, like when you use a mirror like this, and the reflection of this bright spot on the surface is called Sonячny Zaychik in Ukrainian, or Sunny Bunny. So that's the second meaning of this phrase, which I find really beautiful. Like it can be interpreted in many different ways, but I think it's a nice description of a nice phrase to call this festival.
Yeah, reflection of society and life on screen, right? This is, I think it's an eloquent, most beautiful, multi-layer translation. So I want to thank you. And when I learned that, I was like, this is such a marvelous, beautiful phrase. So and it's adorable. Sunny Bunny. Cute. I'd love to I know we have to wrap up a bit soon, but I'd love to at least, talk about the final short in this program too, I'm Michelle, which I know came out last year, and even seeing, a narrative short too. We see a lot of sort of documentaries, maybe about something, but I feel like the creation of narrative films around, trans identity, trans youth and such too, even takes it to another step. And this felt super authentic as well. And I was wondering if you can speak to sort of this film and sort of its impact within Ukraine. I know it's played internationally as well through a lot of festivals. So,
yeah, it's been around a lot, I think, and it was created actually in this residency program for queer artists in Kyiv. This big gallery Izolatia, which moved from Donetsk, which was also occupied in 2014, and so this happened. I think back in 2019, but then it was, director Olena Siatovska intended to make it bigger, develop the story. And so it was reworked, and they did some other filming about Michelle. It's been in many festivals. I think it's a beautiful story. In part of this beauty comes from, subverting the stereotype, because for Ukrainians, Ukraine is stereotypically seen as, Eastern Europe, something homophobic, like dangerous for queer people, but that's not exactly true. Inside Ukraine, there's this stereotype that Western Ukraine is very religious and very traditional, very conservative, and Michelle, who comes from Western Ukraine, goes back to her home village, and we see that she is accepted, and that's such an important part of this film to me, because we all need this acceptance, and we need this acceptance to see this acceptance on screen. And I often avoid programming films that tend to, use the patterns in cinema that are more conventional and more from the past, like no acceptance, like violence against queer people. I hate the films that where a queer character is killed or kills themselves. And I'm happy to see this in Ukrainian cinema, that there are different stories, and they are very inspirational. And the story of Michelle, I believe, is wonderful in that she has found herself. She has become an activist as well. Currently, she lives in Poland, as far as I know, but she came to Sunny Bunny last year when we were showing this film. And she's visiting, from what I know, quite regularly. She, as we see in the film, she goes to demonstrations to, So she takes a position, and this is also important to show queer people that stand up for themselves and for their communities.
Yeah, and I think you tap into it very much. It's sort of like, we deserve joy, we deserve life, and it's such a lovely quotidian kind of everyday kind of affirmation within the film, I think that's captured. But that's also aspirational, right? I know towards the end it's, what will you be in the future? And it's like, I'll be living, I'll be growing, I'll be working like everyone else, like really. And of course, there's a very eloquent way to end the shorts program too, with where else do you want to run to New York City and scene. So it brings us full circle back here in New York City in the theater, even in the virtual land. It's so great to be able to have this kind of technology, right? So we can have this access and sharing of stories and experiences and cultures. So we really appreciate you taking the time to do this right now. And to Polina and Polly, of course, for collaborating on making this a reality too. And you audience too, you're all part of this as well. So thank you for contributing your energy to the space. I know there's a wonderful Peter Hujar exhibit right now too. So if you want to check that out after. But I will leave the remaining moments for you, Bohdan, to either say anything you would like as parting words, and I will just ask one thing as part of the parting words, is to recommend maybe 3 queer feature-length films that the audience should check out.
Yeah, first of all, I want to thank you, Nick, and thank Polly and Polina and the team of Razom and the Ukrainian Museum, everyone who joined the screening. I'm very happy to be doing this. I hope that maybe this program will go somewhere further in the US. So let's see about that. Yeah, I really hope to make these films and these filmmakers more visible and give them more opportunities. So thanks again for this collaboration. Thank you, Nick, for this wonderful conversation. And I want to say, I guess that it's first of all that it's really tough to be in Ukraine right now, and the US has provided us a lot of support. It's, invaluable, but it's important to keep talking about it because we see that it has, lost momentum, and there's less visibility and less information internationally about the war and about Ukrainians. And so I want to encourage everyone and to ask everyone to support any way you can the Ukrainians around you, maybe to share information, to learn more, and you have done already with watching these films. I guess I would recommend a few films that we were showing in our retrospective at Sunny Bunny last year. One of them is Even A by Igor Chernitsky. It's a film from 1990, and it's easily the most homoerotic film from the Soviet Union. I would also recommend Stop Zemlya, which is a newer film, quite recent, from 3 years ago. It was in quite many festivals and also queer, I believe, although some people disagree because it doesn't focus on, queerness or problems, issues of queer identities, of finding yourself as a queer person or something like this. It doesn't focus on this, but I believe that it's very queer or, post LGBTQ, let's say, because it's just part of the story. It's part of the norm. It's about teenagers, and some of them are queer or are finding themselves, looking for themselves, and maybe some of this can be found in queer aspects of their personalities and identities. And another one, well, I would recommend Kira Muratova. Kira Muratova is one of the greatest filmmakers ever. Let's be honest. I have firm belief in this. She's Ukraine. She comes from Ukraine. She passed away some years ago, but I don't know. There's some deeply rooted queerness in her films.
And such too, yeah.
And in terms of storytelling, in terms of she's always portrayed powerful, strong, independent women that go against the norms. And there has been some queerness in her films as well. Like there's 3 stories, and part of it has a queer element, even though it's not the most visible part of it. But still, she's done a great body of work, and she needs to be recognized more and seen more.
Yeah, and celebrated. And, she's just became a little bit more well-known by you sharing this with the audience too. So thank you once again. And thank you for your final words too on, what we can do to continue to support Ukraine too and not lose sight of it.
Thank you so much, Nick. And thanks everyone in the audience.